Okay.
All right, guys. So after you all come in, I'm going to mute all of you just so that there's no background noise while I'm presenting. At the end of the presentation, I will unmute all of you so that you can ask me questions. So now I'm muting you. So if you see anything, I'm just going to know.
Just to find out, her house was already listed, and it's showing she's gonna let me list her house.
Really? That's it. Everyone. I mean, I'm on my mom. You put your hands on.
All right. So again, everyone's going to be muted. Oh, sorry, Victoria.
Mom.
All right. So everyone's going to be muted. I'm going to give us maybe 2 more minutes for people to start coming in. I'm going to start repeating myself about being muted for those that are just coming in now. All right, so Haley, we're going to mute everyone for now, and at the end of the presentation, you all will be able to talk again. Brittany, same for you. I'm going to mute you, and at the end of the presentation, I'm going to unmute you all so that you guys can ask me questions. I'm going to give us maybe like 2 more minutes just to make sure everyone's here. 2 more minutes. It's really good for you guys to have a notepad and a pen if you want to take notes while I talk. If you have any questions that we can ask at the end of the presentation. I think most of you, when you applied for this and you guys wrote down in that form specific questions you had, I tried to address all of them. Some of them I hit home more than others, so if you feel like you wanted more of an explanation as to the certain question you had, again, just bring that up at the end of the presentation and I can answer that for you live, or you can just email me or call me afterwards. It's fine too. All right, we're going to give everyone 1 more minute to show up. I think most of us are here. And then I'm also recording this session, and everyone's going to get a recording of this later. So you know. So if you feel like you need to write everything down, you don't. Just write down some questions that you have. You don't have to try and copy everything I have down here. All right, let's see. I think we've got everybody. So again, the majority of this is going to be you seeing me present a presentation that I've made on PowerPoint. I have prevented people from being able to show their video feed, I believe, or maybe I haven't. You guys have just opted to not show your face, and that's okay because it's going to be not a lot of face-to-face communication during the bulk of this presentation. So again, just reminding everyone, I've muted all of you because I don't want any background noise to happen. At the end of the presentation, when I open it up for Q&A, I'll unmute you and you guys can ask away. All right, so I am going to share my presentation screen. Let's see, there it is. All right, and we are going to get started. Let's see. All right, so also, just a note, housekeeping stuff. If you guys have a problem with anything that I'm doing, like if you can't hear me or anything like that, please text me or call me. My phone is on loud. So if you call me or text me, just let me know something's going wrong and I can address it from here. Otherwise, I won't be able to hear you because you guys are on mute. Also, some of my friends are walking 2 of my dogs. They might drop them off and my dog in the background, Kobe, might start barking, which is a problem that you guys had addressed in the webinar. So you guys get to see live how I address that. All right, so I'm gonna get started now, finally. We are all here because we have more than 1 dog in our household. When that happens, we invite a whole slew of problems because we are now having to not just manage 2 dogs in an individual capacity, but we're also having to manage them in terms of how they interact with each other. So we become kind of like a daycare for small children almost. We're dealing with animals that have the intelligence of 2-year-olds for their whole life. They have sharp teeth, they have claws, and so it's hard for us to sometimes communicate with them expectations we have for their behavior with the other dogs. And also keep in mind that it's hard for the dog sometimes just to communicate with the other dogs. Remember, they are like toddlers with fur. If you ever have felt like toddlers are capable of having a really drawn out, thoughtful, philosophical conversations about their feelings that they have and their interpersonal conflicts, I would be surprised if you thought that was possible. So just like with human children, parents have to help them learn how to communicate properly with other toddlers, other people, etc. So that's kind of like the guiding philosophy I want you guys to apply when I'm talking about different problems with dogs that live with other dogs during this presentation. All right, so let's get started with the first slide. Again, I remember a lot of you had written in specific problems that you were experiencing in your multiple dog household. I have split this presentation up into these different kinds of categories that I have identified so that I can kind of organize my presentation off of directly answering those problems. There's some specific things, like I know, Allie, you said your 2 dogs hump each other a lot. Humping is not a bullet point on here, but it's something that is a subset within another bullet point, like arousal, for example. So humping is a subset of arousal. Barking excessively, I've made it its own category, but barking is also a subset of arousal. So if you don't see your specific issue on here, it's probably an issue that is categorized further underneath these leading higher categories. All right, so I like to take all of my dogs here, and I like to try and split them up into different kind of stereotypical like high school cliques. And I like to do this because it kind of allows us to have a place of mind where we're able to empathize with our dogs more. Sometimes if we're able to make dog behavior or personality analogous to the way a human might act, it makes it easier for us to kind of understand them and see where they're coming from. So that's why I did this. It's also kind of funny. So I tried to lighten the mood here with this. So these are all of my dogs. I've identified them into one of several categories of stereotypical high school stereotypes. Now it's never the case that one dog is 100% a jock or an emo kid. Normally there's overlaps here. So I want you guys right now to try and think of all the dogs that you have in your home. And I want you to try and place them into one of these categories. Remember, the dog doesn't have to 100% match one of these categories, but it can be mostly. Like my dog is 60% a goody two-shoes, so I'm just gonna put her in the goody two-shoes category. So I want you guys to try and lump your dogs into these categories. I pulled all of these definitions of these different stereotypes off of Urban Dictionary to try and really see how society kind of defines these different stereotypes. And I did that because I figured that would be the easiest for you guys to kind of relate to them. So try and put your dogs in these categories. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about that and reflect on it, because we are going to constantly be referring back to these categories throughout the presentation, because this will help us understand more why there might be some conflicts between our dogs, why our dogs might behave the way that they are behaving. So I'm going to give you a couple more seconds here. Okay, so we have one more person being admitted to the group. Oops, sorry guys. Let's see. Oh, we have a chat message, hang on. Okay, so Jessica is telling me what she thinks her dogs are categorized in. That's really good. All right, so I hope everyone has put their dog into one of the categories and kind of make a mental note of that as we go forward. All right, before we move forward, I want to though take a little step away from this and let you know that labeling dogs is something that a lot of professional trainers and behaviorists kind of want to step away from. They want to try and look at behavior in the most objective way instead of the most subjective way. So a lot of the times, trainers and behaviorists try not to anthropomorphize, meaning giving animals human-like traits like I'm doing with the high school stereotypes. So just remember, this is just kind of like a guess for us, and it's just kind of a way for us to just conceptualize this whole topic. It's not something that you would stick to like in a finite kind of way. It's just a way for you to try and organize your brain around this. And the other point is something that I brought up earlier. It's rare that a dog is 100% in one category. Normally, they're on a spectrum. So sometimes, and we know this with people, sometimes the popular jock guy can be the most emo person in the world, right? Sometimes it's situational. So just keep that in mind, all right? Okay, so moving on. We are going to reference The Breakfast Club a lot as well, and the movie Mean Girls. So you're going to see this slide a lot just to remind you to keep that concept in mind of thinking where your dogs are in those categories. All right, there's other leading questions or leading thoughts that I want you to have too for this webinar. A lot of people, when they have multiple dogs, they say that one of their dogs is an alpha dog. And alpha mentality is something that was made popular by Cesar Millan and the Dog Whisperer. It kind of rationalized a lot of trainers to take a very forceful approach when training dogs. They felt like a dog that was being disagreeable, a dog that was being aggressive, a dog that was being irritating or stubborn needed to be put in its place like an alpha dog would. And a lot of these trainers thought that it was the best, it would be a good remedy to these problems to have their owner act like the alpha and physically dominate their dogs. And this thought came about because there was a researcher called David Meck who studied wild wolves, and he coined the term alpha to describe wolf behavior. And he has since then really tried to dismiss people applying that theory to domesticated dogs, because he said domesticated dogs are not wolves. We cannot make them the same. It's not comparing apples to oranges. We're comparing one species, a wolf, to something very different behavior-wise as a domesticated dog. So we want to try and get away from using terms like alpha when we're describing a dog that might be resource guarding. Just because the dog is resource guarding does not mean it's being the alpha dog. I think that an alpha type person, a leader, is one that isn't insecure, is one that is very insecure and confident in themselves. And I don't think that someone that is so worried about about sharing a toy would be so extra as to cause a fight or to bark so much about it. To me, that means that the dog is insecure about something. And normally leaders are people that are very secure and confident in themselves, not insecure and falling apart over not being able to share a toy on the inside. So also keep that in mind as well. Another common phrase to coin to dogs is dominant. Dominant is a phrase that a lot of new wave dog trainers that ascribe to the positive reinforcement philosophy that I do and my company adheres to, they don't really like using the word. There's been lots of conversation in the scientific literature that tries to use dominant in another way that might be more attractive to the larger dog community and these new wave science-based trainers. And the way that they want to define dominance is an individual that has access to resources over another. So a dog that is the dominant dog would be considered to be like the dog that all the other dogs are like, okay, you can have that thing and I'll wait. I hesitate to use that word a lot because sometimes, okay, so my dog is barking at the window right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of food, come here, and I'm going to call him away from it, and I'm going to throw it on the ground. That's all I'm going to do. And I'm going to keep throwing it at him. And what I'm telling him to do right now is you can do something else other than bark like crazy at this person at the window. And I'm going to keep doing this until my dog walker leaves my parking lot. Come here, Cubby. Now, I wouldn't have been able to do that well if I didn't have treats on me. Lennox. So my other dog was barking, and I just threw her a piece of food after I called her to me. I did not reinforce the barking. I reinforced her recall. And I've done this a lot with her. And it's to the point now where occasionally she'll bark at something and then she'll come and find me instead of persist in barking. Because I've made her have a different habit. Good girl, Lennox. No big deal. All right, now if you stop working with them, sometimes they're liable to go back and check it out and start barking again. If they did, I would have just done the same thing. I would have called Lennox to me, and I would have called Kobe and reinforced them for that decision. Okay, sorry, moving on. There should not be any more distractions like that. I just thought this one was relevant to this conversation, so I let it ride. Okay, so back to dominance. Dominance is something that I hesitate to say. I don't like having the words come out of my mouth. I think just because there's such a negative connotation to them, and I feel like if I say your dog is dominant, they won't think of the definition that science has redefined it as. They'll go back to thinking that it's a kind of terminology that supports Cesar Millan's alpha theory when he trains dogs, and I don't want that. So I'm still not comfortable with using the word dominant quite yet. Maybe in a couple years I will, but right now I'm not. All right. So let's again think about why dogs might be considered alpha or dominant, and I kind of touched on this earlier. And a lot of the times dogs act the way that they do in aggressive ways because the bottom two needs of this hierarchy of needs aren't being met. So first, the dog needs to have all its physiological needs satisfied, and then it needs to feel safe. Normally, a dog that is resource guarding an object does not feel safe sharing that object. So if he doesn't feel like he has enough control or enough security and access to his own resource, he's probably going to feel like he needs to guard it. I find that a lot of dogs that resource guard are ones that are prone to having anxiety. You'll see anxiety manifest in other aspects of their life. So people and dogs that suffer from anxiety are typically ones that struggle with feeling safe and secure, I think. And I think it's the same for the dog. So it would be terrible if someone had a dog that was resource guarding, thought it was being alpha when it resource guarded, and went to go and grab the dog, pin it on the ground, and yell at it like Cesar Millan might do. That's going to make the dog feel even less safe. So step one to help dogs that are resource guarders, for example, is to try and make them feel more secure and that the thing that they're guarding isn't going to be taken from them by another dog or a person. And we'll get into more of that later, but this is kind of the more deep conversation about the kind of emotional state of mind that your dog is in when they display these aberrant behaviors that we see when they're interacting with other dogs in the home. And this slide kind of reiterates that. I believe dogs are aggressive with other dogs because they have a violation of boundaries, which causes a loss of trust. And the violation of boundaries are caused by miscommunication or a lack of communication of those boundaries. This is an aggressive behavior to communicate feelings of insecurity. All right, so throughout this slide, we are going to see pictures of this. And when you see a picture of this slide on any one of the issues that I'm talking about today, it means that this behavior that you're seeing in your home is something that can be socially facilitated by other dogs. This is a picture of Sheila's two dogs, Brenda and Sadie Lady. Brenda is the black dog and Sadie Lady is the brown dog. Sadie Lady taught Brenda how to play with toys. And so I use them as an example so that you can see how dogs can teach other dogs behaviors, like barking at the window. So my 2 dogs that I have with me right now, if Lennox was the one that started barking and Kobe never barked before in his life, and Lennox starts barking at a car that drives by, Kobe's going to begin to think that that's what he's supposed to do when a car goes by. So dogs can teach each other to behave in different situations, and that's part of what makes having more than one dog in the house so frustrating sometimes, because you're not the only one that's training your dogs. Your other dogs are training your other dogs to do things. So again, if you see a picture of this slide and any of the other conversation topics we're going to go over, know that this is something that could be being taught to your dog by other dogs. Okay. Also, it's important to train one dog at a time. This is such a huge pain in the butt sometimes. If you have 6 dogs and all of them bust out of your front door or your back door to go in the backyard, you have to train all of them one at a time. Once they are good at that behavior as an individual, then you can start to ask all of them to do the behavior at once. You cannot train 6 dogs a new thing at once. You have to separate them. And I know it's a pain in the butt, and I know it takes a lot of time on your end, but it's worth it. Okay, so this is the first point we're going to go over, and it's resource guarding. So resource guarding is defined as a disagreement in access to resources. So one dog thinks that they can gain access to a resource, and the other dog is like, hell no, no, you can't have this thing. So there's some kind of miscommunication there about the boundary and the expectation. Dogs guard lots of different things. The obvious things that dogs guard are food and toys. A less obvious one is space. So those of you that started talking about redirected aggression, so dogs that crowd at a vantage point in your backyard, at a fence line, for example, or at a window, sometimes when those dogs start to bark, 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 and go crazy, they will redirect on each other. So one dog will turn around and snap at the other one because it's so frustrated, it's taking that frustration out on the other dog. I knew that my dog walker was going to come back today during this presentation, and I knew both of my dogs that I have here right now, Lennox and Kobe, would go and bark at the window. So what I did was I have a baby gate at my doorway, and Lennox is right there. Lennox, because I know that if Lennox was at the window right there with Kobe, Kobe would probably redirect on her and snap at her. So I knew that going in, I planned it, and I prevented that behavior from happening. I knew I couldn't train them because I was having to do this presentation, so I knew I had to rely on my management there and keep them separated. Other things that dogs guard space-wise is sleeping space. Couches, if a dog is asleep on a couch and the other dog jumps up to snuggle up next to them, sometimes that dog on the couch will guard that space. Also doorways. Doorways have so much association built into them. Dogs want to rush out to go into the backyard. You have 4 dogs at a doorway and all of them busted out at the same time. They're liable to bump into each other and redirect on each other. Toys, of course, I already said it's a big thing that dogs resource guard. Food is another big one. And also inanimate objects. Dogs can start to guard crates. If you feed your dog in a crate or your dog likes sleeping in the crate, it'll start to transfer that resource guarding onto the actual crate. The picture of the brown dogs here, the one that has, let's see, the red collar on, that dog guarded socks from people, from other dogs. The owners had no idea why she guarded socks. It was a weird thing for a dog to guard. Sometimes dogs assign this value to objects that we don't see as being something a dog would particularly like. The dog does really like them, and so they deem them as something that's worth resource guarding. And another thing dogs can guard is attention. Whenever I have friends come over and I have my dogs out, and the moment that they go down to the ground to love on my dogs, I know all of them are going to come to that person. And when that happens, 2 of my dogs are going to resource guard that person, that new person that's giving them attention from each other. So you have to be very mindful, especially if you have kids in the home that aren't really capable of remembering that they can't bend down and be kind of like a vacuum for attention for the dogs in the room. You have to remind them they can't do that, and that's hard. So if you have a dog that guards attention, that's a harder one to deal with, because you have to be a lot more mentally present when you are giving attention to your dogs when guests come over, etc. Attention's a hard one. Okay, so how do we help this? So this is where you guys have to kind of remember what kind of high school category you put your dog in, because it's going to determine how we set up the training scenario. So I have assigned different movie characters to these different categories. I want to go over these real quick. So a lot of the times, in my opinion, the emo, really emotionally sensitive dog is going to be the one that tends to have more anxiety and insecurities. The emo type dog is going to be one that normally will guard things a lot. You also might have a troublemaker that guards things sometimes because they have some feelings of insecurity, etc. And then you'll have dogs like the jock and the stoner that are going to walk up to the emo or the troublemaker, not even paying attention to any kind of behavioral cues that the emo or the troublemaker is giving, that they're uncomfortable with sharing the resource. This dog, Kobe, back here, Kobe, he is definitely an emo dog, and he will guard resources from the red and white pit bull that you saw that I labeled as a jock. His name is Max. Max will come in a room, not even check to see if Kobe has a toy in his mouth, and he'll just walk right up to Kobe. And that is not a complementary pairing, right? So in that situation, I know that I'm going to have to focus on Max and Kobe when there is a resource involved. So that's kind of why I want you to think about the different stereotypes that you've assigned your dog when we go through these different exercises. All right, so the first thing with a resource guarder is that you don't want to punish a growl. When a dog growls at another dog, it's a way for the dog to provide some negative feedback. So this is a video right here. I don't know if it's playing for you guys. If it's not playing right now, it'll play in the PowerPoint slides that I give you afterwards. You can play it. But Kobe is guarding this tennis ball from Ivy. Ivy is not a jock or a stoner. She is more of a goody two-shoes. So she has enough sense about her to walk into a room and observe everything that's happening. And so she knows that she can't rush in to grab Kobe's ball. And she is respecting Kobe growling at her. And I know that because as Kobe is growling at her, Ivy's head is turned away from him. So she is trying to appease him and let him know, I understand that you're growling at me and you're feeling insecure. I'm going to go over here and lay down. And she did. She ended up laying down the other side of the room. When Kobe got up to leave the room, Ivy came back to the ball and started chewing on the ball. She waited for him to leave. And that isn't communication. That is an interaction that you want to reward and back up. So when Kobe starts growling at Ivy and Ivy turns her head away, you want to reward her for that. You want to say, yes, good job. Let's go over here and lay down. You don't want to get angry at Kobe, because if I did, he's going to really hate the next time Ivy comes up to him when he has a ball, because he's going to think, oh man, I don't feel comfortable about Ivy coming and sharing this ball. And now I have to expect mom getting mad at me for trying to tell Ivy that I don't feel comfortable. So we want to, again, let Kobe know growling does work. Thank you for growling and not all out attacking Ivy. And we want Ivy to understand what a growl means. A growl means that you go away. So never, never punish a growl. Okay, so the other thing you want to consider is your management. So if I had Max over when Kobe is here and Kobe has a tennis ball, or like what I have right now, the baby gate right there, because Lennox is a troublemaker and she'll come in and not even see that Kobe has a tennis ball in his mouth. So I know that Lennox is probably not going to set herself up for success, so I have to help her. And so I'm using a baby gate to prevent Lennox from coming in here, because I don't want to have to watch her and Kobe interact. I don't want to have to help them communicate with each other while I'm giving a presentation. So I'm going to baby gate her and physically prevent her from interacting with Kobe. Use baby gates, X-pins, and crates. There is a good video on how to train a dog to crate settle. If your dog is not good in the crate, I encourage you to watch that video so you can start using this as a tool. If you have two dogs that resource guard, or if you have a dog that resource guards and they have done a lot of damage to another dog in your home because of the resource guarding, do not allow the dog that resource guards to have that object when that other dog is in the room that they resource guard from. You need to make sure that you have the guidance of a professional trainer to help you with this and another adult in the house. Do not assume that it's going to be okay. I don't want you guys to look at this and think that you can just put them together by yourself. You need to have help with somebody professional to do that for you. But if your dogs haven't resulted in serious injury with each other over resource guarding, only allow the dogs to have that resource when you're there supervising them so you can make sure good communication is happening. All right, so this is, in all my slides, I presented different kinds of specific problems that you guys identified, and I laid out a really small training plan for you guys to work on. So one of the biggest things that I had a request for is how to prevent dogs from rushing out of the door at the same time. Of all my dogs, Lennox is the one that gets really wound up and bolts out of the door. She pisses my other dogs off sometimes to where she sometimes gets snapped at. If Lennox got snapped at by Kobe, who's the one that's more liable to snap, that might result in Ivy jumping on Lennox and starting a dog fight. So I have to really be careful about how we enter and exit this door. So what I've done is I've trained Lennox to sit and wait before she goes outside. She's only able to go outside after all of the other dogs come in. And I made a video of this. I'm not sure why it's not working right now. Sorry. But you'll be able to hopefully click on that video when you guys get the slides. If your dog doesn't know how to sit and wait, there is a link at the bottom of the screen that shows you guys how to train a wait for your dog. All right, so moving on. Here's another problem. So Kobe is in a dog crate. I've drawn a dog crate in this diagram. He's in the crate right there, and he has a chew bone with him. Kobe likes to guard things, toys, food, etc. So to make him feel more comfortable with dogs approaching his crate, I'm going to have Ivy on a leash, and I'm going to walk Ivy by his crate. I'm not going to try and instigate a negative interaction to happen. I'm just going to walk Ivy by very casually. I'm going to start at a far away distance and gradually come closer. If Kobe starts to growl at Ivy, I am going to call Ivy away from Kobe, and I'm going to tell Ivy to go and settle in another spot. And when I do that, I am reinforcing Kobe for thinking that growling works. It got Ivy away from me. I don't have to escalate him to full out attack mode. And I've taught Ivy that when she hears Kobe growl, it means she goes away and does something else. So if you guys have dogs that resource guard, do this activity. Kobe is safely in a crate, so he can't go out and attack Ivy if he gets really pissed off. So that controls the environment there for you. The more that you practice this activity, the more it should become a habit for Ivy, so that if in an emergency situation, Kobe growls at her because you accidentally left a toy out in the living room, Ivy will probably go away from Kobe and go and lay down if you practice it enough, all right? Okay, so another point, feeding time. A lot of people say that their dogs resource guard food bowls from the other dogs. The easiest fix to this problem is to simply just feed them separately. I don't know why it's so difficult for people to accept this and do this. I think it's one of the easiest things to do. My dogs eat separately all the time. They get fed, they get their food bowl for 10 minutes, and then if they don't eat it, they get it picked up, and all my dogs eat in their crate. So ask yourself, do you really want to go through all of the training and helping your resource guarding dog be able to share food better? Or can you just physically separate them? That's the easiest thing to do. if you don't have a dog that necessarily resource guards, but you have a dog that eats really fast and a dog that eats really slow, and your fast eating dog always pushes your slow eating dog out of the way and eats your slow eating dog's food, that's something that I would recommend training. You can definitely train for that because there's no huge aggression there. If you have huge aggression, just try and feed them separately. That's the easiest and safest thing to do, in my opinion. All right. Again, setup's going to be your best friend. Like I said, I use crates. I feed my dogs in their crates all the time. At the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you can see the crate settling video that I made. So if you need to give your dog a refresher on crate settling, feel free to look at that video. All right. So if you have dogs that are resource guarders, or if you have the dogs that gobble up your slow eating dog's food, for example, the best thing to train them to do is to get into the habit of going into their crate or their place to eat. Try and get them into a routine. So I feed all of my dogs in crates in the basement. This is another video that I made. Lennox. And in this video, you'll see all of my dogs go to their respective crates. And they go in there and they settle, and then I give them their food. Remember, these crate doors are open, so if I had food in there and food is what your dog guards, that wouldn't be safe. So wait until they're in their crates, close the door, and then feed them. But practice that routine so that they kind of have this expected dance move that they do in synchrony. You open up that door to the place that you feed them, and they all know where they're supposed to go. Okay. All right, so here's another talking point. That is escalated play. I put a lot of slides in this one because this requires lots of information about knowing dog body language and behavior. I worked for 2.5 years at a doggy daycare in Georgia. That's where I learned a lot about dog behavior and how dogs play with each other. I also fostered a bunch of dogs, and I had I owned a lot of my dogs. So I felt like I've been in a doggy daycare for like the past 8 years of my life. So I've learned a lot about how dogs interact with each other. Escalated play is one of, I think, second to resource guarding maybe, is one of the most common reasons that dogs get in fights with each other. So let's talk more about this. Escalated play happens when a request for a cessation of unpleasant play is retaliated by playmates. So Lennox and Kobe are playing with each other. Sensitive emo Kobe gets pissed off when Lennox, puts her paws on top of his back for too long. And so Kobe asks her to stop playing by growling and snapping at her. Lennox retaliates that snap and that correction by snapping back at Kobe, and then all of a sudden everyone's pissed off and you have a fight that happens because the play has escalated into something that's not fun. It's become serious. All right, knowing your dogs here is super important. When I was in doggy daycare, I would have to figure out in playgroup of 30 dogs which one of you are going to complement each other well and which one of you aren't. And I would only allow dogs that complemented each other well to play with each other. If for whatever reason I had to have a dog that might not be the best complement to other dogs' play, I would have to really watch him and manage the behavior. So just keep that in mind. Play is super important for dogs to do. It's good for alleviating stress, it's good for exercise, it's good for bond, for relationships, and it's practice for other social behaviors. So play is very good for dogs. If your dogs do escalate in play and it doesn't result in any serious injury, I would encourage the play to happen because it is really good for them. Okay, so this is a link to a presentation that me and Rebecca and Anthony did at a doggy daycare. This is an 1.5-hour long presentation. It has so much good stuff in it if escalated play was one of your biggest concerns. So I encourage you guys to watch this in the slides that I give you. Okay, so when you're looking at dogs playing with each other, we have to try and figure out what they're feeling. If we get a feeling that a dog is getting pissed off before the dog even knows they're pissed off, then we can separate those dogs from each other to prevent an altercation from happening. The things that you want to look at are things on the dog's face. It's the ears. So if the ears are scared and stressed, they're pinned down, that dog's getting overwhelmed and is probably about to correct the dog that they're playing with. If the eyes are scared and stressed, dog is getting overwhelmed, it's about to correct the other dog that they're playing with. The mouth is sometimes a really good indicator too. If you have lips that are pursed up like that, it means that the dog is getting scared. Interrupt that play session. This is all about how we help dogs communicate with each other. We cannot do that unless we know how dogs communicate with each other, which is why we have to be really proficient at reading dogs' body language. These are different, more complex behaviors that dogs do with each other. Play bow is really important. A play bow means, in dog language, hey, I hope we can play and you won't take anything too seriously, because I don't want you to take things too seriously. I'm just goofing off and having fun. The second kind of communication is called a rocking horse run. So you might see a dog from one corner of your yard run over to your other dog and play bow. The rocking horse run is something that's more loose and playful. It's something that's not as intense as the flat run that you see right here. The flat run is more of like a stalking predation run, and it's probably going to result in something that's really intense. So if you see a dog flat running towards another dog, you're going to want to interrupt that quick. Lip licking is a sign of stress. So if you see two dogs that are smelling each other and one dog starts to lick its lip, it means it's getting overwhelmed and upset and might be liable to correct the other dog. Body shakes are something that you always want to encourage dogs doing. Whenever a dog, like say the dog that's licking its lips when it's getting greeted by another dog, if that stressed out dog at the end of that interaction, if that stressed out dog starts shaking its body, it means it's shaking off all of that stress that it just had in that interaction, which to me is something that's really good. It's a good way for that dog to cope with that stressful situation. Instead of taking in all those emotions and keeping it inside, it's letting them out and shaking them off, which is really good. Rolling over is a way for a dog to show that they're not much of a threat. So you might see dogs that are very dog social enter into a play group or a dog park within your home. If you see a dog really kind of stand over top of one of your other dogs and your other dog kind of just like rolls over, that's a really good communication pairing. The dog rolling over is trying to tell the dog that's coming over and standing over top of them, I don't want any harm to you. I know you're feeling insecure and anxious right now. I want to make sure that you know that I'm not going to test you, right? I'm not going to annoy you or irritate you any further. The twitch is what dogs do before the play bow, or I think before the hump, or before they start to get snappy with each other. So if you see the twitch happening between two dogs that have a history of maybe not getting along too well, you're going to want to really watch that and make sure that that interaction doesn't happen for more than 3 seconds. You're going to want to really try and manage that and guide and shape that communication between those two dogs. And then we have the flirt. The flirt is a dog that will go up to a dog and greet them, and then try and put their head over top the other dog's shoulders, and then they'll put a hand up, and then they'll start humping. That's what dogs do that don't really know each other that well or aren't really comfortable with each other. And flirting is something just like with people. Some people are more comfortable with being flirted with than others. To dogs like Kobe over here, Kobe does not tolerate that at all. He is not okay with being flirted with. My dog Elsie, who fits the stoner category, is totally okay with being humped. She doesn't care. So dogs that have more boundaries, that are more anxious or insecure, tend to not want to be humped as much. They're not comfortable with it. All right, and these are different kind of play situations that happen. In graphic number 1, the Dalmatian is getting very overwhelmed by the black and white dog right there. So if I saw that play happen in my house between my 3 dogs, I would immediately try and call the fluffy black and white dog away and give them all a timeout and a break, because the Dalmatian is overwhelmed. Situation number 2, that's a really good interaction. The collie is really listening to the Doberman's kind of more aloof indecision about really not wanting to play. The collie is waiting for the Doberman to approach her to play, instead of the collie being more of a play bully and assuming that the Doberman wants to play. Graphic number 3, the Rottweiler is being very playful and nice and loose. but the small dog is overwhelmed by the Rottweiler. So if the Rottweiler went to go and play with the small dog's probably going to snap at the Rottweiler because it's terrified. The Rottweiler in that situation should be a little bit more cautious in its approach and recognize the small dog is a little bit uncomfortable and do more of a behavior that collie in graphic number 2 is doing. Graphic number 4, dog letter A is kind of about to maybe hump dog B. Dog C is probably about to muzzle punch dog B. And dog D just looks like he's derpy and just hung out with A and C and did whatever dog A and C did. I think what happened in graphic 4 is dog B was running around going crazy in the backyard. So if you guys have multiple dogs that run fence lines or one has the Zoomy, you'll see a lot of your other dogs chase that dog. When that dog that had the Zoomy is caught, you'll see dogs kind of like corner that dog almost when they stop. And the dogs will do one of the things that these 3 dogs are doing. And you see dog B in this situation is shaking his stress away. So he knows that this is an awkward, tense situation and he's trying to diffuse it by shaking. So if you see this situation happen, I would call dog A away from dog B because I think dog A is liable to be the one that's going to be most overwhelming to dog B. All right, and then body position as well. If a dog looks stressed or scared, you need to stop that play situation quick. Always, always, always use your tools, your crates, your X-pins, and your baby gates. Use these areas for timeout. Timeouts are so important for dogs in play groups. Sometimes when I worked at the daycare, dogs would only be able to play for 5 minutes at a time, and they would be in a timeout for 15, and I'd have to rotate them like that. Sometimes you need to do that with your dogs, especially if you have an older dog and you have a puppy. Jessica, I know you have a Husky and the Golden Retriever Border Collie mix. The Husky plays a lot with the Border Collie Golden mix and sometimes overwhelms the Golden mix. So the Husky needs to practice taking lots of play breaks from playing with the Golden Retriever mix so the Golden doesn't get overwhelmed by the Husky. So you want to really try and utilize these tools again to try and help the dynamics in your house. Timeouts are so crucial. And then this kind of goes into how you can compliment your dog. So I know I'm not going to pair Kobe, my emo dog, with my jock, high energy, playful dog that doesn't really pick up on social cues well. Because I know that the jock is not going to pick up on Kobe's more sensitive boundaries. So I'm not going to pair those 2 together in play group. And if they ever thought to play with each other, I'm going to be watching them really quick and only allowing them to play for maybe 3 seconds at a time. So think about these personalities complementing each other again. Timeouts, again, super important. Gives everyone a chance to decompress and breathe before it gets too serious and out of hand. Practice rotating dogs as well. Important graphic here is about arousal levels. This is really important for dogs that might enter a play session really nice and loose, and then after an altercation happens, their attitude towards entering the play again shifts from one that's more loosey-goosey and playful to one that's more serious and aroused. So if you see a progression of your dog from going loose, like in the green picture, to going all the way in the red, you know that that dog is no longer comfortable in this play session and needs a new playmate or to take a timeout, for example. All right, I hope none of you have experienced a dog fight before. I've experienced several, unfortunately. So in my mind, I always try and think whenever I have more than one dog in the house or a play group, I need to figure out which dog I should remove from an altercation first. It's kind of counterintuitive. If you ever have dogs that have fought with each other, you're gonna want to take away the dog, the black dog in this situation, not the brown dog that's on the Australian Shepherd. If a fight happens, know that the dog that's already on top of the victim dog, that's already happening. We don't want to spend time removing that attacking dog from the victim dog. If we spend the time doing that, then we might have the black dog come in and grab hold of the Aussie. Now we have 2 dogs attacking one dog. So we want to try and limit the potential for other dogs to be attacking the one dog that's playing victim. So have that in your head. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it's super important. Okay, so this is a video on escalated play. In this video, you'll see it in the slides when you get them later. I'm trying to artificially make them really excited. So the first part of the video, you'll see me running around and acting crazy because I'm trying to bring out that play. Kobe and Elsie start to get a little bit escalated in play. And so what I try and do is body block them. So if I see them really trying to get amped, I will walk in between them. I try not to grab the collar first, because whenever you grab the collar, it kind of makes the dog feel a little bit more stressed and might make them escalate even more. So I try and body block them first to separate them. If body blocking doesn't work, then I do grab the collar, and you see me do that in this video. If you have more of an instinct to grab the collar instead of body block, make sure that you condition the dog to feeling a collar grab, meaning pair that collar grab with food, outside of just situations where you're applying a collar grab to mitigate escalated play. So when you go on a walk and you leash them up, for example, practice grabbing the collar and feeding them a piece of food so that they don't think that collar grab means, ugh, I hate this, I should get more amped up. Instead, collar grab means maybe I get food. So collar, pulling them away from each other is second to just moving your body between them. After you get them separated from each other, I like to ask them to sit and wait. And by asking them to sit and wait, it allows them to kind of take their own little time out without me actually having to physically put them in timeout. The wait happens for just a couple of seconds. I look for the dog to breathe deep, they go. And then after that happens, then I say, free, you can go and play again. So I just give them a little bit of break from that intense play, and I have them enter that play again with a more clear mind. So that's a really popular way to mitigate that escalated play. If your dog is really good at touch or a recall, you can try and call the dog away from playing. That doesn't really work as well in my opinion, because if you're calling one dog away, the other dog might still be playing with that other dog. So it's hard for Kobe to come away if I call him, if Elsie is still chewing on his leg playing with him. So I like asking all of them to sit and wait. Okay. All right, let's talk about exercise. A lot of you guys talked about wanting to walk everyone at the same time. Notice the graphic at the bottom of the screen. Having difficulty on family walks can be a social facilitated learning thing. And the reason why it can be a socially facilitated learning thing is if you have a dog that is reactive, meaning it likes to bark at cars, kids, bikes, other dogs, people, it's going to probably train your other dogs to be reactive too, just like window barking, for example. So before you guys decide to go on a group walk together, make sure that your dogs are not reactive, okay? That's a whole separate issue. So think about why you're going on the walk. I think I like going on walks because I like exercise, I like to enrich them, I like to bond with them and relax. A lot of the times, though, it ends up being a source of stress for you and the other dog. So think again, why am I doing this? It kind of guides you into doing a better practice with that. If you identify your dog is reactive, for example, don't take them on a walk with your other dogs, because you're just asking yourself and your dogs to be stressed out. So try and think, why am I doing this? If it is to relax, take the dogs out together that aren't reactive, okay? And then work on your reactive dog's reactivity issue separately. Okay. So some of the issues that people have on walks is leash pulling, dog-on-dog reactivity, leash reactivity period, resource guarding over trash in the ground, rolling around in mud puddles, eating cigarette butts. Those are all things that stress people with multiple dogs out. Another thing to consider, of course, is what stresses your dog out on walks. Being rushed by stray dogs, kids on bikes, loud trains, dogs barking out of windows, stepping on thorny plants, seeing new things, hearing new things. And then, of course, seeing you, their mom, be stressed out too is stressful. So when we're thinking about how to train dogs to walk well together, we have to make sure that we're trying to prevent all of these things from happening through other kinds of training. Some of the best things to do that I found for walking multiple dogs is to have different leash lengths on your dogs and have the leashes be different colors so that you know the pink leash is on Kobe, the blue one is on Ivy, the purple one's on Elsie, etc., etc. If you have a lot of large dogs in your household that pull you, and that's the reason why you can't walk them, while you are also trying to train them for better loose leash walking skills, I recommend that you get a head collar for all of them. The head collar prevents you from feeling that pull as much. It's the only way that I was able to walk all 6 of my dogs together at the same time, and all of them are like 50+ pounds. The head collar does take some getting used to for the dog, so you will have to do some training with that. All right, so loose leash walking is something that you definitely should train your dog as an individual. I am loose leash walking here with 3 of my dogs, so it is possible to have more than one dog loose leash walk. Of course, I had to train all of my dogs separately to do this before I expected all of them to do it together, okay? It is possible. This took probably 2 months for me to do. Okay. If you have a dog that is reactive, you need to practice specific reactivity training. And that involves doing lots of desensitization and counter conditioning. If you think you have a dog that is reactive, let me know. I just did a reactivity webinar, and I will gladly give you that reactivity webinar recording so you can start working with them on that. Okay, barking is another point. I'm trying to go quickly because I think I'm running short on time, so I'm sorry if I run over. Barking. Think about why dogs bark. Dogs bark because they're dogs. It's a natural dog behavior. People that expect dogs to never bark should have gotten a goldfish and not gotten a dog, because dogs do it. I understand that barking can get really annoying and irritating, especially when you're trying to take a nap and your dog barks when it hears a twig snap outside. So I understand your pain, but I also want you to understand dogs do bark. So don't expect your dog to be quiet all the time, all right? When our dog is barking and we have a problem with it, try and identify why they're doing it in the first place. If we can identify why our dogs are barking, we can work that into a training program to try and limit the frequency with which they bark. In my house, I specifically built a privacy fence so that my dogs would not be able to see as many things, so that they wouldn't be triggered to bark. So if you are thinking about installing a fence in your house, or you have enough disposable income to get a new fence, I would recommend getting a privacy fence. If you get a privacy fence, your dogs cannot see people walking, dogs walking by, and so they'll probably not react as much. Now they can still hear it, so you still will get some reactivity, some barking through a privacy fence, but you won't get as much. If you can't afford a new privacy fence and you already have a chain link fence, I recommend you get some bamboo screening. It's probably like $20 for maybe 8 feet, and it just prevents them from being able to see those things again. They can't see the kid quietly walking down the street, for example, but they can still hear things. For inside, I recommend getting window films. These are things that you can buy. It's cheap. You stick it on your window. It doesn't look bad, in my opinion, and it prevents them from being able to see everything that's walking by them on the street. This is management. This is something that you're going to rely on a lot. All right, so if you have a dog that is in a chain link fence, you can't afford to get any of those visual blocking things that I just told you about. This is the training protocol that you would do. Have your dog on leash. Your dog starts barking at the trigger. You call the dog to you, and then when the dog does come to you, you give them a treat for it. You set this up intentionally every time with one dog at a time. You saw me do this with Kobe when he was barking at the window. So you do the same exact pattern at your window with your window barkers too. If your dog is barking so much that the dog can't be redirected when you call them away, that means you're too close to the trigger, so you might want to try and move farther away from that thing. If you can't move so far away from the thing, your dog is still barking even though you're as far away as you can be from the trigger, you need to practice this outside of your fence, out on a walk in a park, for example, where you can get 100 feet away from the person that causes them to bark, for example. All right. This is a video of Lennox barking. She still barks at strangers. She's gotten a lot better at it now. It's to the point, since we practiced that exercise I just had that picture up of, she will start to automatically come to me when she gets upset about a person that she doesn't know. And so ideally that's what we'd like to do. Lennox is starting to do that for me here at the house. She hears my neighbor's car start up, she starts to bark at the fence, she turns around and cries and tries to find me. So she offers a recall when she sees or hears that trigger, and that's because we practice it a lot. You guys can read this later when I give you the slides. This talks about breaking up a behavior pattern. So if every time you open the back door, your dog immediately goes to charge the fence and starts barking, it's because the dog has trained itself to do that. It's trained itself. It pays off every time I go outside. I know there is a person outside. The neighbor's dog is always outside barking. I know it's going to be there, so I need to run and hit the fence and start barking. If that happens, you need to stop that pattern from happening so he doesn't fulfill that prophecy he's laid for himself. So that means it's going to be a pain in the butt again. That means you go outside with your dog on a leash and you don't let that dog finish that behavior pattern, running off that deck to charge your fence, all right? The dog can't because it's on a leash. You ask it to do something else, like turn around and come to you. Simply throw a piece of food on the ground or a ball on the ground. Try and let the dog know, yes, you can do option A, which is run towards the fence and act like a crazy person. Or why don't you try and do this other thing that I'm showing you that you could do right now? And it pays off because you get a food reward, you get your ball thrown to you. All right, then we're going to talk about arousal. I think this is the last one, so thanks for bearing with me. I know I'm going over time here. Arousal is getting really, really excited by something. Very broad definition. Arousal can happen a lot. It is something that's socially facilitated. So you have dogs that jump at you when you come home from work. We can really see dogs will start to train other dogs to do that. So let's get into how we can help with arousal. All right. So dogs can express arousal in a lot of different ways. Allie, I'm thinking about you and your dog that tends to hump your other dog. Sometimes this can happen in the middle of play. Dog gets super excited, decides to grab on and start humping. Barking is another way to communicate arousal. Jumping, running around, nipping, doing behaviors more intensely like biting harder on a tug, or behaviors can stop. A dog gets so excited it doesn't really want to eat as much anymore. So these are all ways that dogs can express high arousal. Important note, especially if you guys have younger puppies that are like 8 months, 24 months old, they are going to get excited by lots of things. It is unrealistic to expect them to never get excited. We simply want them to express things, their excitement in different ways. You can't, like when I come home from work, Kobe, I know you're excited to see me. I love you too, but please don't jump at me and scratch me. Can you sit instead? And if you sit, I promise I'll pet you. That's what we want to try and train them to do. All right, use your management tools again. If you have a dog that jumps on you when you come home from work, instead of letting them be able to jump on you when you open that front door, or put them behind a baby gate, or put them in an X pen so they don't have access to you. To help with dogs that get really aroused, we want to start with building their ability to focus through the arousal. This video shows you an exercise on how to get a dog to offer you eye contact when they're in the middle of a frustrating or arousing situation. So watch this video. This is kind of the second step to that. So we can teach a dog to sit in the presence of high arousal. This is me working a shelter dog named Bean, and I'm playing with him with a food toy that he really wants. He tends to like to jump up on people. So I'm teaching him the only way that he's able to get this toy and continue with the play is to sit and be calm and regulate himself. And then this is a video of me training my dogs to settle on the couch while I leash them up to go for a walk. A lot of the times you take the leash out of your closet, your dogs start going crazy. They're like, oh my God, we're going to go to the park. Oh my gosh, we should get excited. And they start doing zoomies. Ivy and Elsie, my two dogs, who start playing really rough with each other. So I found that really annoying and I wanted it to stop. So I trained them all to go to a place on the couch, and I trained them to sit or lay down and wait there until I put their harnesses on and I release them. That's another really good activity for you to train your dogs before they go on a walk for sure. All of these activities teach your dogs how to have some level of impulse control. Impulse control is the solution to high arousal. So work on these behaviors, and they should apply to any other kind of situations that you're experiencing with arousal. And then Lennox, this is a video of Lennox, Matt settling before she's able to go outside the front door. And this is the dog that likes to bolt out the front door.
Yeah. Wait. Wait.
And that blue ball is something she loves.
Wait. I'm looking for breath.
I'm watching to see her breathe so that she can kind of settle into it.
Three.
And then when I release her, she's able to go outside and get it. So that's something that you really want to teach your dogs that bust out that door again. Dogs that really greet you excitedly at the door, you can train them to go on mat settle, gets them away from you, has them lay down, has them take some deep breaths, and then after they're a little bit more calm, you reward them by releasing them. Oh, there's one more topic, aggression. I promise it's not going to be so long. Okay. So aggression is defined as a combination of different behaviors that aim to communicate feelings of being stressed. It's a way for dogs to communicate they're not feeling super hot about a situation. It's not always a bad thing. It's negative feedback. It's something that should be embraced more than what it is. All right. So people tend to say, my dog is being aggressive. I want him to stop being aggressive. I want him to be okay with getting his bone taken by his sister. I want him to be okay with getting jumped on by his sister when he's in the middle of a nap. I want him to be okay with the other dog running a fence line next to him and bumping into him while he's going to the bathroom. They don't allow their dog to have any kind of intolerance of annoying behavior. And to me, that is so fundamentally flawed, because you as the human dog owner, you certainly don't feel you should be expected to be okay with anyone and anything, doing anything to you. So why should your dog be okay with any dog doing anything and everything to them? It's okay for your dogs to have standards for how they're interacted with, just like it's okay for you to have standards on how you want to be interacted with. If I got off this webinar, drove to your house, gave you a big hug, and then kissed your significant other, you would be like, what the hell? That's so messed up. She shouldn't be doing this. And then you might start getting aggressive with me because I totally violated a boundary that you thought you had communicated to me. So think about that with your dogs as well. Aggression is not always a bad thing. It's normally an indication that someone else is being inappropriate and annoying. So when your dog is aggressive, think in your mind, if I were him and I found that annoying, what would I like to have happen? What would make me feel better about that person and that interaction? And let that kind of guide you in how you problem solve a situation. Again, if you have dogs that are fighting with each other, use your tools. Whenever I have Max come over, the jock dog, he has to always be physically separated from Kobe because Kobe will attack him. Kobe has attacked him several times. I don't want to mess around with it anymore. I don't want to use training anymore. I just want to physically separate them and not have to worry about them killing each other. So use your tools if you need them, all right? Other tools for aggression, like what I have to do with Kobe sometimes, is to put a basket muzzle on him. That prevents him from using his teeth. If we're working with a dog that resource guards, if we're working with a dog that has dog fought with another dog, we want the dog to practice communicating what it feels it needs to communicate, but we want to kind of take out our worry of the dog being able to use the knives that are inside of its mouth, its teeth, and causing a lot of physical damage to the other dog. So use a basket muzzle if you need to, Just like with the head collar that I showed you when I talked about group walking, basket muzzle needs to be trained to a dog. You can't just slap it on a dog. You can also use a hitch for the dog. So if Max came over and Kobe was here and I wanted them to share physical space while I watched a movie, for example, I would put both of them on leash and I would attach one dog to a hitch that I have on one side of the room and I'd attach Kobe to the other hitch. Or if I had a friend over, I would have the friend hold Max on his leash while I hold Kobe on his leash. I'm not allowing them to physically come into contact with each other, but I'm allowing them to share physical space so that I feel like both dogs are getting attention and time with me. Okay, so if your dog is ever being aggressive, this kind of falls back to what we learned about in resource guarding. Back the dog up that's growling. If the dog is growling at another dog, tell that other dog, go away. Max, Kobe is growling at you right now. Please respect him and move away. And that will make Kobe feel more comfortable with Max's presence. Max and Kobe can't be around each other anymore because Max has violated Kobe's boundaries so much that Kobe does not feel like a growl is going to communicate his insecurities enough to Max. So now Kobe feels like he has to all out attack Max to get his point across. And that's what we want to avoid to have happen with dogs. So if you punish a growl, if you ignore a growl, Kobe and Max situation is what's going to happen. I know you guys are messaging me. I'll look at the chats later, and then I will come back. Okay. We're almost done, I promise. This is a video that shows how to kind of help two dogs communicate better with each other. Lennox and Ivy kind of disagree with each other a lot, so you'll see me let them interact, and then I'll quickly split them up. If you have two dogs that don't get along or dogs that have recently fought with each other, condition them to wearing a basket muzzle and walk them together, but have them be parallel leash walked. So in this video, you'll see me and Olivia walk two shelter dogs that don't really have a good history of being social with other dogs. And we're parallel leash walking them so that they have exposure to another dog and we try and shape it into something that's really positive. It's really important, again, to remember body language and all the different kinds of escalated signs of aggression here. So really study this slide when you get the copies later. And this is a slide that you saw at the beginning of the presentation. It's just kind of there to remind you again of the overarching philosophy that we have here as to why dogs act the way that they do. And then this slide, it kind of makes me cry every time I read it because it's all about the importance of dogs communicating with each other and communication, period. When you read this, it kind of really brings out your empathy that you have for the dogs. So whenever you're feeling really let down about your dogs not being the best communicators, just read this and it kind of makes me feel better at least. Because all of this is about helping dogs that maybe naturally don't communicate well with each other. You have the jock and the emo that don't communicate well. We're here to try and make that communication better. And that's it. I'm so sorry I ran over. So now I'm going to unmute all of you. And actually, if you have a question, why don't you write it in the group chat? And if you don't know how to access the group chat, you can unmute yourself and just say something out loud, and then I will answer your question. I don't know if that was the best way to organize that, but we're just going to go with that. So questions that you have in the group chat, if you have a question, write them down. I'm going to go through questions that I already have in my group chat. Okay. When you say throwing treats, are you using multiple scattered around randomly through the room? Yes, so I have a bag of treats with me right now that I brought for Kobe. And if Kobe was barking at something, I would take one piece of treat, just one piece of treat, and I would throw it for him to go and get it. If you have resource guarders in your home, be aware that if you throw a piece of food on the ground, all the dogs are probably going to go to it. So you're going to want to keep them separated if you have resource guarders. But yeah, I use one treat. And the reason why is because I want to give the dog an opportunity to come back and practice the barking behavior. And if he doesn't repeat the barking behavior, I want to catch that and say, yes, thank you for not barking. Here is your reward. Yeah. So I'm just doing one treat at a time. Zelda doesn't always understand Hazel wants to back her off. I never correct Hazel for her communication attempts, but how do I manage Zelda without Hazel thinking I'm trying to manage her? Okay, so with that, it depends on the frequency, I think, with which Zelda bullies Hazel. If you think Zelda is not picking up on Hazel's cues a lot, and it's very frequent, like more than 50% of the time, I would have you do intentional training sessions with them where you might have Zelda on leash when she's playing with Hazel. And if Zelda is getting too much and Hazel corrects Zelda for it and Zelda doesn't back down, I would use the leash to call Zelda away from Hazel. If Zelda doesn't come away from Hazel, then you're going to physically tug on that leash to physically remove Zelda from Hazel. And then I would keep Zelda on that leash at a distance away from Hazel. And I would wait to see if Hazel approaches Zelda again to play. If Hazel does approach Zelda again to play, I would allow Zelda to play with Hazel again. If Hazel does not approach Zelda to play, I would put Hazel up to take a timeout, and I would play with Zelda to get some of her energy out there. If that didn't make sense, let me know, Allie, and I can talk to you more about it later. All right, we have one dog that only cares about fetch and another dog that resource guards attention. What is the best way to be able to play fetch while not getting the second dog in attack mode? Okay, so I think I need to know a little bit more about that picture there. I'm going to try and answer this to the best of my ability. I assume that both dogs are together in the room while you play fetch with the dog that resource guards attention. If that is the case, I would separate those two dogs when you play fetch. In my house, I have two dogs that resource guard toys from each other. They are not allowed to have toys with each other. I can't play fetch with the dogs because I know that's going to be a vacuum for all the other dogs to come to me and get attention, and that's going to cause attention guarding. So when I do play fetch with Kobe here, this dog, that's been in the presentation this whole time, I do that with him one-on-one because I know that it's just going to invite fights. The other training aspect to that is to try and train the dog that resource guards attention to do a mat settle. So send them to the mat, have them wait there for maybe 2 minutes, build up a 2-minute mat settle, and then you can play fetch with your other dog for 2 minutes while your resource guarding dog is away from that scene and mat settle. That takes time to build, but it is certainly possible. If that didn't make sense or wasn't a good enough answer, email me later. All right, any other suggestions besides treats for an obese dachshund? He is highly food motivated. I would ask, how much are you feeding him? And I would ask if you've checked for him having a thyroid problem. I treat my dogs so much during the day that I don't feed them as much kibble. So I know that I'm going to be giving my dogs a cup of treats every day because I train a lot. So I'm only going to feed them half as much as they would normally eat in a day, kibble-wise. If they're supposed to get 2 cups of kibble and I know I'm going to give half or a whole cup of treats to them throughout the day, they're only going to get 1 cup of kibble. If your dog is toy-driven, you can also explore using toys for rewards. If he is so highly food-driven that he will eat his dog kibble, you can try and use dog kibble as a reward. I know Allie and her dog Hazel, they use kibble as a reward for Hazel. So you can train him using his dinner, essentially, which is really nice. Okay, Sheila, Jim says it looked like you rewarded barking. How is giving treats to pull a dog away from what it is barking at? How is that a solution? All right, so you remember when Kobe was barking at the window? I did not say, yes, here's a treat while he was barking at the window. Instead, I called him away from the window. I say, Kobe. And when he turned his head around to look at me, I said, yes, and then I threw him a treat. So what I did was I rewarded him not for barking. I rewarded him from barking to turning his attention onto me and then coming away from that window. That's what I rewarded, not the barking. That is a very common question that a lot of people have. The thing is that dogs operate kind of like in a 2 to 5 second window of memory. So if he's barking 1, 2 seconds, and then I say, Kobe, come away, and it's been 2 seconds that he's come away from that barking, he's now in his brain saying, I'm moving away from barking at this thing. And then if I back it up by saying yes and give him a treat, he's going to think that he's being treated not for that barking, but moving away from that trigger and recalling. I promise it works, I promise. I haven't worked a lot with blind dogs, but they can benefit a lot from verbal cues and like tactile touches and stuff. So we'll have to talk about working that later. Okay, so I think I answered all of those questions. If you guys think of any more, feel free to text me, email me, or call me. I'm going to wrap this up, and I will be emailing you all a recording to this and all the slides. In those slides, when I email those slides to you, please go back and look through those videos where you saw me doing training exercises. Those are really beneficial. And I know I probably didn't go over everything that you guys wanted me to. This is such a broad topic that there's just so much to go over and not enough time. So please feel free to reach out to me about any of this, and I will gladly answer your questions. Thank you guys for being so patient. I know I went way over. I love all of you, and thank you so much. Any questions that you have, feel free. Again, I'm an open book. You guys help me learn more. Okay, thanks guys. I'm gonna end the meeting. Let's see if I can do this without looking awkward. Hang on. Oh, okay. All right, I am ending the meeting. Okay, bye guys.